everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to I Took a DNA Test, ... by Maven Huffman. Now, I'm not super familiar with Maven Huffman. Did a quick Google search and saw that he's a professional wrestler, now is a YouTuber. And then when I started reading the Wikipedia, it was like saying his MyHeritage DNA test, whatever. And I think it was talking about this video because I took a look at it, how they were citing it, and it was like this video. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I should just stop reading here and I'll go ahead and watch the video. It's actually not super long, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's just jump right in.
Now, today's video is going to be a little bit different. You see, for 47 years, I have never known anything about my biological father. Don't know his name. To be honest, never really cared to know. But that means there's just a lot about my background that I am unaware of. Well, today, that all changes.
I really hope he talks about DNA matches or looks into any of that, because obviously this is going to give him just a general idea of, you know, the ethnicities of his ancestry. But to learn the actual story, even if he doesn't want to know who his father is necessarily, it still may be interesting to know his ancestry through his father, and just kind of a bit more about that story and the actual, you know, where they came from. But let's see what he says.
Okay, quick history lesson, and please bear with me. I know this is a bit complicated. In 1975, my biological mother would move from Virginia to Nashville, Tennessee, where she would meet my biological father. In 1976, I was born, and 2 years later, in 1978, the day after Christmas, my biological mother would sadly commit suicide. Now, my biological father wanting nothing to do with me, after my mom's passing, I would be adopted by my biological mother's brother and his wife. Now, I know technically this is my uncle and aunt, but I'm 2 years old. This became mom and dad immediately. And this would become the mother that everyone would get to know on Tough Enough. So that's why I don't know and have never known anything about my biological father. No one on my mother's side ever met the guy.
Now, one interesting thing that I want to say at this point is that it's very common in my experience that a lot of adoptees, if the side that they're adopted into has no contact with the other parent or anything like that, then sometimes you get a very one-sided view of the story of what happened. And not to say that, you know, they're wrong in what happened or anything like that, but I can see he has a very, very negative view of his father, obviously, and it sounds like the story puts him in a very negative light. But I would be kind of interested to see what is his father's story. Now, it could very well be that his father is a scumbag and, you know, is as bad as he seems to be kind of alluding to. But it's, you know, kind of that idea of just, you know, there's a side to every story sort of thing. And having worked so many adoptee cases and having seen so many various adoptee cases that other genealogists I know have worked, it's not a very uncommon thread of, you know, one parent being painted very negatively. And then when you learn the story, things are a bit more complicated and all of that. So let's continue, but just an aside.
They didn't even know his name. My mother never talked about him much. And it's crazy to think that 47 years of my life went by with such a gap in my background. Here we go.
He's going to show the little intro video thing they do.
Uh-oh. Wow.
All right, you got it. His first reading being one of the broadly categories, unless they break it down more first in a broad sense and then break it down regionally. But
and 26.3% North and West European, which I've always been told with the Huffman last name, I had some German in me. 24% Irish and Scottish and Welsh.
So right now we're just getting very general Northwestern European readings. Talked about this many times on the channel, very common. So people from Northwestern Europe, the history of Northwestern Europe causes your readings to be very difficult to decipher at a very specific way. And so a lot of these sites, when you have Northwestern European ancestry, you'll see a very common mixture where it doesn't necessarily indicate that ancestry for you exactly. It could just be a difficulty of reading things and they think it's one thing, but, Northwest European, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, British Isles, Scandinavian is a big part of that too. So a lot of people with this, I'm sure, we're only looking at about 50% at this point, and with a North and West European reading as his highest, I imagine we're going to see some Scandinavian readings. Very well may see some more Central European type of readings too. It may not be super surprising to also see some maybe like Southern European or East European, but if we do see like a large chunk of it, that could be indicative of something else, because that's not quite as common to get in large amounts with a Northwestern European ancestry.
13.2% Nigerian.
Now that's very interesting.
Okay.
9.8%
West African. And 26.7% 6 more ethnicities. So, okay. This is history that I never knew. I could always trace my mother's lineage, my mother's side, to the 26.3% North and West European. I always knew that I had some German in me. Looks like there's some Italian. It's odd because I was always told that I had some Greek in me as well.
Certainly could still have Greek, and they're just picking it up as something different. Remember, the North and West European reading, they give you that kind of little blob of, the map, the like kind of a circle, but it's not just those areas. It really expands beyond that. So something like Greek, which is a Mediterranean area, that Italian reading that he was looking at too, that could be part of it as well. So this is one of the things with the test is when you do get the admixtures, it doesn't always necessarily mean what it's telling you exactly is the exact ancestry. It may be something more tangential to that. And when you look at how they break down these population groups, how they define each one, you'll notice it because they don't have a breakdown of each country or anything like that. Sometimes it's just regionally. With Greek, you could expect all sorts of stuff with that. And being that, we haven't looked at all of the other stuff beyond that, we may see more things that indicate some sort of a Greek ancestry. So, Western Asian, Balkan readings, obviously, maybe even Eastern European readings with that, but also North African readings. And yeah, so let's take a further look.
Looks like I have some Swedish and Norwegian in me.
That's Scandinavian.
I could always guess. I always knew that was in me from the history that I was told from my mother's side. So many people told me that they thought I might have some Latin American in me, but it would appear not. All that.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. We haven't looked at the rest. We only looked at a few of the larger ones, and yeah, he's getting those African readings, which obviously indicate that his father was of some sort of African ancestry. I'm guessing African American ancestry. It's also possible that he may have had Latin American ancestry too. It's not uncommon, and actually a lot of people with African American ancestry also have lineages tracing to communities that enslaved people that were outside of the United States. So in the Caribbean, in South America, in Central America.
Ethnicity that I questioned, for my entire life, from a side of my family I've never met. That seems to come completely.
There we go. Okay, I want to go back a little bit so we can see the full breakdown. Okay, so here we have the full breakdown. So 24% Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, 8.5% East European, 5.2% Scandinavian, 1.9% Italian. So the 8.5% Eastern European is very interesting. And another interesting thing to note is if he truly is coming from African American ancestry, meaning that he comes from ancestors who were enslaved in the Americas, as opposed to coming from African ancestry that is a much more recent post-slavery migration, because obviously there are a lot of people from Africa who've migrated to the US and don't have ancestry of enslaved ancestors. But if he does, it's very possible that some of the European that he's getting, including some of this Northwestern European stuff and the Irish, Scottish, and Welsh and all that, could very well be coming from his father's side. So that 8.5%, that's kind of an interesting one of, is it the mom's side or the dad's side? Or is it representative of both? Either way, it does kind of stand out enough that it makes me think that if we were to build out his family tree, we would probably find some Eastern European ancestors within the past 200 to 300 years. 8.5% if it's coming from one recent ancestor, so not coming from both sides or anything like that, but from one, then we're looking at a great grandparent to a second great grandparent about. But then looking at the rest with that 5.2% Scandinavian that mixes in with the Northwestern European, and then that 1.9% Italian, that could obviously be that Greek that he had mentioned that he'd heard about. And that Eastern European also could have been part of that Greek. But either way, we know for sure that he's getting European ancestry from his father's side because he has well over 50% European. Now, it's not uncommon, let's say, if you're somebody where you have one parent who's 100% European and your other parent who's 100% African, and you take a DNA test and you get 51% African and 49% European, that doesn't necessarily mean your purely European ancestor has African ancestry. Sometimes it just can be, it's not, these tests aren't perfect, so they can't always get it exact. But if you're looking at well over 1% difference of what, 50-50 split, like we are here, because before, I forgot exactly what it was, but it was about 26% North and Western European. So 26% plus the 24% is 50%. And then adding all of these other things in, that's, 60 some odd percent European.
Completely 100% from Africa. I see 13.2% Nigerian, 9.8% West African, 6.6% Kenyan, 3.4% from Sierra Leone, and 1.1% from Central Africa. So now I know I truly have no Latin American in me.
I still would not say that you can truly know you have no Latin American in you because a few things. Number one, your DNA is not representative of your entire ancestry. Remember, you're getting, from your dad, out of all of his DNA, you're only inheriting 50% of that. So 50% of his DNA you just didn't inherit. Yeah, you can say not seeing any hints that I do have it, but he could have he could find out what his family ancestry actually is, build it out, and then all of a sudden find out that, oh yeah, well actually I have an ancestor in the 1700s who came up from Brazil to the United States, and then they, integrated into the community and had children and whatever, and he descends from that. Well, then he has Latin American ancestry. Basically saying you don't want to hit a hard conclusion like that when you don't see it in your admixture results.
Anyone has asked me what I am, I've always said, I don't know. Whenever I was in New York, people thought I was Dominican. When I was in Florida, people thought I was Cuban.
It definitely makes sense because his skin tone certainly has that sort of Hispanic Latin sort of skin tone. If he doesn't know what his father's ancestry is, that would be kind of the guess, but it certainly makes sense that, it's really just African-American ancestry, and then because he has so much European ancestry, because his mom's purely European, then he gets a much lighter skin tone.
And when I was in Virginia, people thought I was black. Now I will be able to have answers. I'll be able to have concrete proof. It's somewhat of a relief to know exactly where my ancestors, where my lineage comes from. And something else I was able to uncover, which actually comforts me a great deal. It doesn't appear that I have...
Yes! Matches! Okay, so looking at this, we have some pretty good matches starting off. 178.9 centimorgan match. That's a really good match. Appears in a family tree with one person, so she doesn't have a tree built out, but that's the type of match where you could easily figure that, well, not easily figure that out necessarily, but with some work you could probably figure some stuff out. And with the DNA tools MyHeritage has available, so you can see that cursor right to the right, there's DNA tools. Well, there they have auto clustering, and if you ran an auto cluster with matches like this, we have two matches over 100 centimorgans, very well over. 142.9 and 178.9, really good matches. And then the one down below, 94.6, all in the US. Now, we obviously don't know, is it the mom's side or the father's side, but this is the stuff where if he wanted to figure out the identity of his father and find the actual names of his ancestors on that side, whether or not he wants to meet them, it's kind of like he's doing now, just taking it a step further and learning the true names. And, you know, the admixture, I like to say, is a very blurry image of your ancestry. So he was saying, you know, he's very happy that he gets to know exactly where his family's from. I would disagree with that statement of it being exactly where they're from. I would say it's a very blurry idea of where some of his ancestry may have come from or is correlated to. So, you know, he talked about possibly having that Greek ancestry that he had heard about. Well, if you do your family tree and you find Greek ancestry in there, just because it's not showing up in the DNA admixture results doesn't mean that you don't actually have Greek ancestry. But if you have that Greek ancestry, you have the paper trail, and then you find DNA matches from that side, that proves it conclusively with the DNA, even though the DNA admixture percentages aren't saying Greek. That's kind of where it really takes it, is it goes well beyond, oh, well, you know, knowing, you know, a blurry idea to actually knowing exactly where they came from. Now, obviously, that can be limited on how far you can get back, but with matches like these on MyHeritage, he can also upload his DNA to GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA, Genie.com, Living DNA, and then get more matches to possibly expand the tree out even further. But either way, great that he's showing matches. Very awesome to see. Let's see what he says.
Immediate relatives, meaning brothers or sisters. So I'm happy knowing that I haven't spent my entire life not having a relationship with someone who was directly related to me.
See, that's the other thing too. Just because they're not in the database doesn't mean that they're not out there. So, you know, any day now, he's done the test, any day now he could get a match from some unknown close relative, and then all of a sudden that, you know, that's a big change. But, you know, in my experience with doing a lot of adoptee cases, when we look at their matches and we build out the trees, we're able to figure out through the connections of cousins who their likely parents were. And then when you find that family, the thing is to contact them and ask them to do DNA testing, or if they have done DNA testing. And more often than not, they haven't done DNA testing, and they need to for us to be able to actually figure it out. Because for as many people as in these databases, there are a lot more who aren't. All right, let's continue.
So that's a comfort in itself. The relatives that I am seeing, and it's a lot, are all either second cousins or third cousins, or parents' second cousins. Relatives that, yeah, they're related to me, but they're the relatives that we rarely meet, see, or ever have a relationship with. So that's a
depending on the family.
knowing that
like for me, I grew up knowing a good amount of my second cousins, kind of knowing some of my more distant cousins. I will say, yeah, it's super common that a lot of families, you don't really know that many second cousins. I mean, even though I knew growing up some second cousins and some third cousins and more distant cousins, you know, I only met them a few times, and then there were a lot more who I found through genealogy that I didn't know before. So
I haven't missed out on a relationship that I probably should have had for the last 47 years of my life. So am I happy that I finally uncovered this mystery? Well, absolutely. I learned more about myself in one day than I ever have.
All right, well, that was actually a really great video, even for being somewhat of a shorter DNA video. Usually the DNA videos are like 20 minutes long, and I know it makes mine end up being like 40 minutes long. Awesome to see that, you know, he had the DNA matches, actually showing them. It was a little disappointing to hear him come to so many kind of conclusions of, well, I don't have this, and I'm glad I didn't see any of these cousins or, you know, close relatives, because that means I would have missed out on something. But, you know, like I said in the video, just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not there. You know, for the admixture, if you're not seeing something that you're expecting, doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. You have to look further into it to see, you know, what I'm getting something that can correlate to what I understand. If he had been expecting his mom's side to be entirely Greek, then yeah, that would have been like, okay, something weird's going on there. But he said he just heard about having some Greek ancestry, which certainly could have made sense with that Italian reading, with the Eastern European reading. But I think it'd be really, really interesting to have someone dive in and try to identify his biological father. If he's interested in that, Maven, if you're watching this, I would certainly love to have you on my series, YouTuber Family Trees, where I'm actually already doing this research for another YouTuber whose grandfather was adopted and he didn't know his grandfather's parents. And right now I've done DNA testing with the family and all these different things to try to identify the grandfather's parents. And let's just say things are going well. So if you wanted to learn the identity of your father and also find out, do you have siblings? And if you want to get in contact, that's something I can do too, because I've actually helped a lot of people in my search angel life, being a search angel, helping people as a volunteer, identifying biological family using DNA tests. I would be happy to do that. That's one of my specialties. So if you'd like to be on my series and have that done, hit me up and let me know. But overall, this really was a really fun video to watch. It was interesting to hear about the story that he had. I really would be interested to learn more about that story. One thing that I would really recommend Maven watch and others watch if they haven't is relative race. And I've actually done reactions to relative race in the past, so look up my reactions. It's a really fun show where basically people who were adopted or trying to find family go on the show, and it's a competition where they're going all over the country, but at the same time, every day they're meeting new relatives, including people meeting their parents for the first time, siblings for the first time, aunts and uncles and cousins, and so many different things. It's amazing. But one interesting thing is when you watch that show, you will kind of get an idea of what I said earlier in the video, where, you know, there's always multiple sides to the story, and sometimes what the adoptees hear or the child hears isn't really quite the full story, especially when they're only being influenced by the other side of the family. Obviously not negating anything that they necessarily said or, you know, anything like that, but, you know, it's just the truth about it, that there always is another side to the story. But this is the type of thing where, you know, I can certainly understand a lot of hesitation if he did figure out the identity of his father and siblings and stuff like that, where it's like, I don't know if I want to contact them right away, you know, let me sit on it sort of thing. Whereas for other folks, sometimes it's like, okay, let me go ahead and bite the bullet. You know, it's a lot of emotion wrapped up into it. So, you know, it's very understandable. Now, this video was actually done just a month ago, but MyHeritage will be doing an update to their admixture results. I think they said it's going to either be June or July. I can't remember. I think they just kind of gave a general idea anyway, because, you know, that stuff can be hard to roll out sometimes. They got to check everything and all of that. So his may change, or probably will change, like everyone's will, once that happens. And then looking at those results, it might be interesting to see what the difference is, and is there going to be any Greek popping up? And may that give a better idea of his father's side as well. Although it's certainly obvious that his father is coming from an African ancestry, a very strong African ancestry. And if you enjoyed this reaction and would like to see others, especially one that talks about African American ancestry and using the DNA test to actually build out the family tree, be sure to check out this reaction right here. Thank you to all my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.